The morning of May 7th, 1915, was bright and calm. The sea off the coast of Ireland shimmered like polished glass, and aboard the RMS Lusitania, passengers strolled the decks beneath a gentle sun. The great liner cut through the Atlantic with the grace of a floating city, elegant, confident, alive. Children played along the railings, their laughter rising above the hum of the engines. Couples read in deck chairs. Stewards carried tea and biscuits. There was a sense of safety, of civilization at sea, a belief that even in war, some things remained untouched. But beneath that calm surface, death was already moving. A German U-boat, silent and unseen, glided through the depths. Its commander, Kapitänleutnant Schwieger, watched the periscope with cold precision. He had his orders. And above him, 1,959 souls went about their mourning, unaware that history was already closing in. Among them was a man named Thomas Avery, a father, a teacher, a traveler. He had boarded the Lusitania in New York with a single suitcase and a photograph of his wife and child. For him, the voyage was not just a crossing, but a promise that the world would return to peace, that reason would triumph over madness. The Lusitania was no ordinary ship. She was a marvel of her time, faster than most warships, grander than any hotel, and painted in peacetime colors. Yet Germany had warned that any vessel sailing through British waters might be destroyed without warning. Few believed it. Few could imagine that such a threat would touch a civilian liner. At 2:10 in the afternoon, as the Irish coast came into view, Thomas stood on deck, the wind brushing his face. Somewhere below, the U-boat's torpedo tubes were being loaded. The men inside the submarine worked in silence. The ocean pressed around them, heavy, endless, ancient. Then came the order. Feuer! A hiss, a streak of white beneath the waves. The torpedo cut upward through the green depths, fast and certain. Above, the passengers felt nothing, not yet. Then a sound like thunder. The ship shuddered violently, a deep, gut-wrenching roar. Metal screamed, the deck tilted, dishes shattered. People froze where they stood. Smoke and steam burst from the side of the ship, rising in a great gray cloud. Thomas was thrown to the deck. He heard a woman scream, saw a child's toy roll across the planks. Somewhere, a lifeboat tore loose and crashed into the water below. Panic spread like fire. The Lusitania began to list sharply to starboard. The sea was pouring in through a massive wound in her hull. Within minutes, the grand liner that had crossed the ocean 100 times was dying. Orders were shouted, "Women and children first!" But the deck was chaos. Some lifeboats broke as they were lowered, smashing against the hull. Others couldn't be released at all because the angle was too steep. Passengers clung to railings, praying, crying, shouting for loved ones who had vanished in the smoke. Thomas made his way toward the port side, helping an elderly man who had fallen. The water was rushing up the stairwells now, carrying with it luggage, furniture, and lives. Steam roared from ruptured pipes. Somewhere below, the engines had stopped. The mighty ship groaned as though the ocean itself were tearing her apart. At 2:25 p.m., just 15 minutes after the torpedo struck, the Lusitania rolled onto her side. People slid across the deck, screaming as they fell into the cold Atlantic. Thomas held on to a railing, feeling the tilt increase until the world inverted and he was thrown into the sea. The water hit like glass. The cold drove the breath from his lungs. He kicked upward, breaking the surface amid chaos, planks, lifeboats, debris, and bodies all around. The Lusitania's stern rose high into the air, her propellers still turning. Then, with a final groan, she slipped beneath the waves, swallowed whole by the Atlantic. Silence followed. Only the cries of survivors broke the emptiness. The ocean stretched wide and merciless, dotted with life jackets and fragments of what once was civilization's pride. Thomas clung to a piece of wreckage, shivering, his mind numb. Around him floated men, women, children, some silent, some praying, some staring at the horizon, as if refusing to believe what had happened. The sea, so beautiful that morning, had become a grave. Hours passed. Rescue boats from the Irish coast began to appear, drawn by flares and desperate signals. The survivors were few, 764. The rest, more than 1,100 souls, vanished beneath the water, including nearly 100 children. As Thomas was pulled aboard a trawler, he looked back toward the place where the Lusitania had gone down. The ocean was calm again, indifferent, unmarked by the horror it had just consumed. In that moment, he understood something that would echo through the rest of his life, that in war, innocence offers no protection, and that the sea remembers every cry, every heartbeat it takes. The sinking of the Lusitania changed the world. It shocked nations, fueled outrage, and drew America closer to the war it had tried to avoid. But for those who lived through it, the tragedy was not politics, it was personal. Thomas Avery would later write in his diary, "We thought the ocean was endless. We were wrong. The distance between life and death is only as wide as one breath." And so the Lusitania sleeps still, deep beneath the waves, a silent monument to the fragility of peace and the cost of ignoring the warnings written by war.